Yes, Norman Brower and myself are out here on the Catawissa. It's going to be shortly before the New York City tugboat will be scrapped. And hopefully we'll be able to record as much information and data as we can.
We're on board the Catawissa. It's a 172-foot steam coastwise tug. She was built for the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad in 1897. She towed coal barges up and down the eastern seaboard. The coal was loaded usually in Port Richmond, Pennsylvania, north of Philadelphia, in the Delaware River. And she towed these barges out the Delaware Bay and up the east coast around Cape Cod and into Massachusetts Bay, and they fueled power plants in Massachusetts, Boston, and other communities. And the coal was used to produce power. One use was operating street railways. Trolley systems required a great deal of power at that time. She had a long active career. She operated for other owners under the name New York at one point. Later she was tank master #1 of the Bethlehem Steel Company, and they based her at their shipyard in Hoboken, New Jersey. At that point she was no longer operational. They even took the propeller off, and they used her boilers to clean tanks, clean oil sludge out of fuel tanks or cargo tanks and vessels that were going to be worked on in the shipyard. This was for safety because of welding. They didn't want the remains of oil in the tanks. It could cause a fire from the fumes. So tank cleaners were very important at that point. She was a barge. Essentially, they took the propeller off. They eventually took the wheelhouse off as well. And she was towed to wherever she was needed. She was operated later as a tank cleaner by private firms after Bethlehem got rid of her. A very powerful towing engine, steam operated, which was located in this compartment, aft end of the deckhouse. Her main steam engine still on board. When she was deactivated as far as operating under her own power and just used as a tank cleaning plant, they kept the main engine, which we'll see later, virtually as ballast. It's a very intact steam engine of 1897. But the towing engine in this compartment has been removed. You can see evidence of where it was. It was used to shorten up on along tow lines because the barges that she towed were spread out once she got to the open sea. They could be extending over a mile astern. The furthest barges, in some cases, well, even more than a mile, might even be hauled down at the horizon by the time you got to the last barge of the tow. But in port, of course, they had to shorten up. They had to bring the barges in and shorten up so they weren't interfering with other traffic in the harbor. We're all the way at the stern of the boat now, and she would have had more machinery here for towing. At the present time, there's a towing bits, a set of them back there, which may have been added later. Also, some of her old steam piping has been dumped on the stern. You can see very large diameter steam pipes there with valves. After she was retired as a tank cleaner, she was offered to various museums. No museum wanted to take on a boat this size, but an organization was formed to try to save the boat just as a one-vessel preservation effort. This was ultimately unsuccessful. She passed to another private owner who hoped to restore her but didn't have the resources. So you'll see a lot of debris on the boat that's accumulated over the years since she was active in any form, including debris from other boats that were tied up next to her. Some of this is actually her remains that have been removed from other parts of the boat, some is not. This is that after space in the deck house where the towing machinery would have been located, and you can still see some remains in the form of steam pipes, both down near the deck and up near the overhead. One very large diameter steam pipe coming through the bulkhead back there probably had to do with the steam cleaning operation. We're looking at the upper engine room with the gratings and the top of the engine in the center of this space, which is open. Above it there's a beam because they could run a chain fall along that beam up near the overhead and take off the heads of the cylinders in order to work on them. Move in. And we're standing right above the triple expansion engine, and you can see the tops of the 3 cylinders here. The smaller cylinder was high pressure, the largest was low pressure, and the one in between was the intermediate pressure cylinder. Triple expansion was a great advance in the efficiency of marine steam engines because it used steam more than once. Steam was used initially in the high pressure cylinder, and then it was exhausted and used a second and finally a third time in each of the larger diameter cylinders. This created great efficiency in the use of fuel, and this is what ultimately made the steam vessels on the ocean competitive with the sailing ship and brought the end of the sailing ship era. This is one of the spaces the crew lived in. It still has a sink in this corner. Everything else has been removed. The one next door to it still has a wooden berth with the big drawers underneath. And it also has a sink in one corner. And these two were side by side, one opening out on the port side and one on the starboard side. We're in the upper engine room now. Catawissa had one large steam boiler providing steam for the engine. The boiler had 3 burners. In 1897 it would have been burning coal for fuel. Later in her career she was converted to oil fuel. We're looking down at the front of the boilers. You can see where the 3 burners were located. The middle one has been opened. This made it possible to go in and do maintenance on the fire chamber, which was lined with fire brick to retain the heat. The coal bunkers would have been on either side, and when she was coal fired, they would have shoveled the coal into the fire chamber down here and broken up the ash and removed it. But the oil fuel was piped in through the burners, and in the center of each of these burners it was vaporized, sprayed into the fire chamber, combined with air for most efficient combustion, and this turned the water above the fire chamber into steam to power the engines. Now we're forward on the starboard side, still on the main deck. You can see how they loaded coal when she was a coal burning vessel. There's a bunkering lid here. You would have a solid manhole lid that goes on top of this, but that could be removed if they wanted to let some ventilation into the bunker. We're all the way up on the bow now, still on the main deck. There's a pilot house on the upper deck, which was not original to the boat. She had a much bigger pilot house, which included some, at least, living quarters for the captain, where he could be on call. May actually have been the captain's stateroom after the pilot house, but all that was removed when she became a tank cleaning plant. They've also removed some of the towing bits. You can see the base, the wooden base for towing bits here on the bow. Looking further aft, you can see some mooring bits on the rail, which would be used to tie the boat up or to bring a barge alongside when they were in a harbor.